Right, great. Thank you, everybody. I'm grateful that you were able to join the webinar today. My name is Leo Kowalski. I'm the Director of Programming at the Pennsylvania Solar Center. I run the Get Solar program along with my coworkers, Amelia Egan, who's actually on another conference call with the regional university, and my coworker, John Bunny-Radapan, who's joining me on the call today. John, for the remainder of the call, if folks have questions about the presentation until we get to the end, if you could post them in the chat, John will be able to field them, or we'll queue them up for me to respond to while I'm speaking, just so we don't have a lot of crosstalk or cross audio. We would just prefer if everybody stayed muted until the end of the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pennsylvania Solar Center briefly, and then the Get Solar program, specifically what the Get Solar Communities program is doing here, and how we could help anybody on the call that is interested in receiving, participating in the program, receiving our services. But yeah, so I mentioned here up top, Get Solar team, Amelia, John, myself, and Sharon Pillar, our executive director. We all work to help support organizations going solar as part of the Get Solar program. But our mission and vision is much broader than just getting solar up on buildings. It's really about creating a greater share of opportunity to all Pennsylvanians through solar empowerment. And when we talk about the value of increasing solar, it's not just getting solar on buildings, and it's not just utility scale solar. That's great. That does help ratepayers to put up large utility scale solar, to diversify our grid, to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels for economic, social, and environmental reasons. But the real beauty of solar is that it's a truly democratizing technology. It scales from one solar panel that can be put on a shed or a chicken coop all the way up to a large scale utility solar installation and everything in between. So it's a really amazing technology that does give us a tangible way to help everybody share in that wealth. I mean, traditional energy structures have been pretty inequitable in their impacts and their benefits. And solar presents an opportunity to kind of change that narrative here, specifically in Pennsylvania, where we have fallen pretty significantly behind our neighboring states. And you think about what's happening in New York and Massachusetts and Jersey, even Maryland. They've really moved their renewable energy aspirations much further than us, and we haven't changed our policy in 20 years. So there's a real opportunity to change. There's a bill in the state house and in the state senate that would radically upgrade this requirement and change the landscape of solar and frankly all renewable energy systems in the state. We're not going to get too much into that call, but if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the policy piece, we do have a significant role in that world. Our executive director, and our director of government affairs, Matt Mahoney, do a lot of work in that space, and we'd be happy to connect you to the right resources. Here's a list of our generous sponsors. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're largely foundation funded. We do get a lot of support from the industry, the solar industry, from regional partners and national partners. Here's a list of some of our major supporters, and we're really grateful. Some of you on the call today. It's really wonderful. I appreciate you so much. Yeah, I mentioned we do a diversity of things. We have our transform, educate, and advocate buckets, I like to call them. And in reverse order, the policy and education advocacy I mentioned up top. It's really important to have state legislators, civic government on board for solar. It really helps expedite solar adoption and increase make it a lot easier for folks to go through the process and benefit from it. And while there's a lot of really amazing stuff happening federally, there are states that are doing a lot more work here to expand that, and we could be one of those if we engage a little bit more with our leaders and tell them that we want that. We also have outreach public awareness hub. So we passively host a lot of resources on our website, permitting guides, a landowning guide should be coming out soon for folks that own property. I know some folks on the call are landowners that have been approached by solar developers to lease their land for community solar. And we want to make sure that you know your rights, know what the best opportunities are for you and what the best practices are in the industry. So that landowner guide, if it's not on the website today, it will be out soon. It's been under legal review to make sure that it's perfectly sound. We have a developer directory. So if you go through our website, you click on your county, there's a list of solar developers that do work. If you're a residential customer or a commercial customer that doesn't necessarily need all the support that we can provide, that list is there, and we're constantly updating it. So if you're a solar developer seeing this video and you want to be on that and you're not currently, we just have a few requirements in terms of certifying that you're a legitimate business and have met some like NAPCEP certification. Well, please reach out to us. We also have an educational series, a webinar series monthly that covers a range of current topics, from solar end of life, recycling, to rural energy. Grants and finance was the thing we did recently, to pretty much any kind of topic that's meaningful of the day. A lot of policy work obviously has been going on lately, and discussion about that. And really the meat of our conversation today is the walking the walk, the technical support. Let's skip through those to the commercial and nonprofit sector. Our Get Solar program is the vehicle through which we help organizations achieve their solar aspirations. We'll talk a lot about the ways that we work with organizations to achieve this. Is really what the communities program is about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is just a process for us to help you go solar start to finish. And we do really mean start to finish. We go from basic feasibility, like very high level analysis, starting at zero. So if you've never even thought about solar or explored it one bit, you reach out to us, that's perfectly fine. We'll do layout and design based on satellite imagery of your property. We use the program called Helioscope, which is a fairly industry standard design technology software that allows us to use a pretty practical view of what solar could be, using estimations with real equipment, like actual structural design of the solar as it would be put together by your installer. And with that, accompanied with electricity bills or other information about your property that you can provide, we can gauge pretty well what your costs and savings will be, factoring in some of the low-hanging fruit in terms of federal tax benefits, which we'll talk about a little bit, and maybe other potential awards or grants or financing mechanisms that are available to you. And because we see a lot of projects, and because we stay acquainted with what's going on in the industry, usually we're using a pretty accurate estimation of the equipment costs and the installation costs. But again, it's educational purposes. We would then hopefully take your project out to a competitive bid for regional solar developers. So if you're a mom and pop pizza shop to a school district, we craft a request for proposals process that accommodates your needs in the region in which you are located, so that we get solar developers that actually can do the work and are meeting the kind of requirements of the goals that you have for your project. We only work with NAPCEP certified solar developers on our projects, and we tend to work with a lot of really talented, really qualified organizations across the state. And to some extent, we can keep it fairly local if that's a preference. So we can do a lot of work to help build the local economy of solar for you. When we get those proposals back through this process, again, we run that start to finish, the request for proposals. We will fill the on-site visits. I'll talk a little bit more about this stuff later, but we will help you analyze that. We don't just dump that on you and hope that you can figure it out. We'll work with you to understand what they're proposing, making sure that they're comparable in an apples to apples fashion. You can see costs and savings, in a direct line, how they compare against each other, and give them an opportunity to express their narrative and their quality of service based on how they view themselves too. So there's both the quantitative and qualitative review. And then we help you with the financing strategy. So we've helped organizations, and I'll show some slides about this, receive grants. We've helped organizations develop complicated capital stacks to get their solar done. These are the kind of things that we want to help every single organization that applies into our program to do, start to finish, full spectrum support. Who do we serve? I mean, pretty much everybody but residential customers currently. Like if you are listening to this because you're looking for residential solar, we can steer you in the right direction, and we may be able to provide some support, but it's not where our active programming is. For a business and nonprofit, there's a lot more sophisticated decisions and decision making that needs to happen, and the financing is a little bit more complicated, and there's a lot more to consider. So we really want to focus on those organizations because they need the help. But small businesses to large businesses, nonprofits, municipalities, school districts, farmers, landowners, really huge opportunity for folks who own land, who are working in agriculture, to utilize solar to stabilize costs and stabilize their property. And faith organizations, there's a lot of faith organizations that reach out to us about getting solar, and they have, again, a pretty unique path towards financing that, given what they are and are not able to receive in terms of grants. But they do have congregations and they do fundraise well. So there's a lot we can do to help them identify their benefits for solar. We work with a nonprofit called Generation 180 on solar for schools. So school districts are a really great organization to have in front of us right now, because we have a lot of resources to put together to their benefit. So Generation 180 is really good at working with the organization's leadership to help create some consensus on solar and help them understand, like, maybe at a high level, the benefits. And then we do the technical work that I just described, helping them start to finish, move through the process. And we're doing a lot of it right now. So we have in our queue anywhere between 130, 150 projects in any given moment that we're working on. And they're not all going to go solar, but it does represent a pretty significant amount of solar opportunity, largely through these partnership programs, through the Get Solar Communities program. And then we do have a fair amount of folks that just reach out to us through our website or referred to us from other organizations. So solar can be a pretty long tooth process. We've seen an enormous spike since the Inflation Reduction Act and activity here. So a lot of these projects are still moving through the beginning phases or in the RFP phases we talked about. But we're hoping over the next several months to announce quite a few success stories. And I hope that if you're on this call, that you're a future success story as well. I want to highlight a couple tentpole projects that just show the kinds of things that we can do. Not a comprehensive look, but just a couple of projects that demonstrate, like, the versatility of what our program can offer. Community College of Allegheny County, North Hills, north of Pittsburgh. This is a 0.5 megawatt installation developed by BAI Group through a power purchase agreement. This was installed 2 years ago, right before energy prices spiked. So some of our assumptions about the costs and about the cost of electricity and the savings that they're getting actually really favored them once they've installed this. 28-year term. So with the power purchase agreement, I'll talk about it a little bit later. The community college did not pay for this upfront. They're just benefiting from a reduced bill over this time through a partnership with the developer and a tax equity partner, or through private finance that they've brought to the table. And again, I'll describe that process a little bit more, but this is one example of a project that has come through our program and successful. Another is small business in Wexford, Pennsylvania. This is a relatively small project, all things considered, 32 kilowatts of installed solar. The family ownership group owns this building. Z-Bart as a automotive retailer they retail automotive parts and do provide automotive resources. They're a long-term leasing building. They're splitting the benefit of the solar, and they just paid with it through capital and benefited from the tax credits and the depreciation. So no special bells and whistles here. It was just a good investment for them, they felt, and we helped them complete that project. Infinity Solar is a developer on a project. I'm pretty sure we have 2 folks from Infinity today on the call. Thank you for supporting us in the program. Burner International, Newcastle. This is for their category, a small business, but they're relatively large manufacturer of air curtains. If you walk through a building and had a blast of air hit you, that creates a climate barrier and a thermal barrier. They manufacture those. They had a 1.3 megawatt system that they actually made the decision to finance through their lending institution of preference. They applied for USD REAP grant, assuming that if they got it, that's great. If not, no big deal. This made sense. They did end up getting the USDA REAP grant, which at the time was a 40% benefit. So 40% of the system was paid for. They'll get a rebate from the utility company, around $25,000. And before some of these other bonuses and before the USDA REAP grant, they were set to save $2.5 million. That number is now dramatically increased. So we should probably update the slide. But this is developed by Energy Independent Solutions, EIS Solar, in the greater Pittsburgh region. So all that said, it's really a great time to go solar. My colleague on a previous call today said this is the best time in history to go solar, and that's absolutely true. Because one, unfortunately, our energy prices are much higher. This slide probably needs a little bit of updating for all rate classes. It's a little bit different in utility markets, but we saw the global impact of natural gas prices affect our electricity pretty dramatically in the last 18 months, seeing rates go up in some markets as high as 45%. And that was a war happened overseas. The cost of natural gas shifted, and because we are increasingly dependent on natural gas in our electricity mix, your electricity goes up, and that's every single utility market in the state. These are the kinds of things that I would imagine, anticipate will keep happening. We don't have a lot of control as customers over the price of these resources, except for that solar does give us a lot of control over that. When you have installed solar, either through a PPA or a self-finance solar installation, you know what your energy price is going to be over the next 25, 30, and potentially much longer term, 25, 30 years, much longer term. And like the trend for our electricity mix currently is going to be worse. We're going to have, and by worse, I mean, I guess it's less diverse, which means we are more reliant on one type of energy source, which means our prices are going to be impacted by that global market. A greater solar mix at the utility level would be good to help defray that and reduce the burden on energy users, but you can defray that on your property by choosing to go solar. The main vehicle for the main vehicle for solar finance has always been tax benefits. For a long time, up until last year, that meant exclusively for-profit entities getting a dollar tax credit. And that tax credit was starting to decline in its value based on the legislation that established it, kind of running its term. The Inflation Reduction Act really changed the game for tax benefits by both increasing that base value back up to 30%. So your base value for your tax credit, if you're a for-profit entity, is 30%. And there's a couple of bonus riders that are really exciting. Domestic content bonus, we don't get into this too much because of the availability of the materials to meet this benefit. There's limited availability, and frankly, they increase the cost quite a bit right now, but the goal of this tax benefit would be to change that market, and hopefully we get some more domestic material. But the others are really exciting. The energy community bonus. Oh, in this slide, there should be another wing here. So apologies, but the energy community bonus and the low income community bonus should be separated here. It's 10% for both. If you're in an energy community, you get 10 additional percentage points on your tax credit. And that's defined by a couple of metrics. The closure of coal plants or the existing fossil infrastructure that has impacted the community, and the labor rates. So folks that are out of work, based on the loss of those industries, there's a calculation that combines these things, and annually they'll revisit it. But right now, a lot of Western PA qualifies. A fair amount of Eastern PA does, frankly, too. But if you're in Allegheny County, for example, or Indiana or Westmoreland County, you're getting this bonus. So your base tax value is automatically 40% in all those regions. The low income actually should say here 10 or 20%. If you're in a low income community, which uses some similar metrics about unemployment rates or demographics and income distribution. Again, it's a complicated formula that we get into a little bit more on the policy side, but you have another 20 or another 10% if you're in those eligible communities. And if you are an organization providing low income housing, that's 20%. So if you're an organization that does low income housing in an energy community, you're getting 60% of the cost back from your tax benefits. Now, I've spoken explicitly in terms of tax benefits. the really exciting thing in the Inflation Reduction Act is nonprofits can now unlock those tax benefits too in the form of a direct payment. So there's still some guidance coming out about this from the IRS. We have a lot of it right now, pretty much almost all of it. This will function probably similar to an income tax return. We don't have a true sense of the timeline. But if you are a tax-exempt organization in an energy community and you install solar and you pay for it up front, you're going to get a 40% rebate back from the federal government. That's an enormous change in the way that solar can be financed for nonprofits who've almost exclusively relied on power purchase agreements or grants. Like now, solar, the ROI on solar for a tax-exempt organization now is actually really strong, given those energy prices and given this change in the Inflation Reduction Act. I should say too, we're gonna go through this finance like fairly quickly. We will likely do an entire finance webinar in the near future, or a series of those for each of these community programs, because it is a lot to unpack, and we'll try to approach that in a more hands-on way. So once organizations know that they want to go solar, we will really dig into this with you and look more individually at what your resources are. And that feasibility report I mentioned earlier, after this webinar, you can just get on our website, fill out a pre-qualification survey. I'll have a slide about that. You're basically telling us where your property is. And if you send us an electricity bill, a recent copy of it, we'll send you a full report on these tax benefits and some of the grants and other opportunities that we know immediately would be available to you. So don't worry about trying to retain all of this information. I mean, I'm really just trying to let everyone understand that there's a lot of opportunity to finance your solar in a way that would benefit you, if not immediately, fairly quickly. The long-term power purchase agreement I mentioned with the Community College of Allegheny County. Basically, you're entering an arrangement with a solar developer and some kind of financing entity. Sometimes that's in-house for them. Usually it's a third-party tax investor. They're actually going to own the solar array for some amount of time, probably 20 to 30 years. And they're going to do the operations and maintenance. They're going to make sure it's operating at peak efficiency. And you're going to be buying the electricity from that array that's on your property at a reduced cost from what you would have been paying from the utility or supplier rate. So this is a really great opportunity for larger energy users like school districts, hospitals, municipalities, and some just large nonprofits to go solar, to take a benefit, but to not have to spend capital that maybe is constrained, or perhaps they just want to direct it somewhere else. It's a really good fit for those kinds of organizations. We see school districts do this a lot. It's always an option for for-profit entities that are larger too. It just makes a little bit less sense given their some of their other tax benefits. Grants and partnerships. Again, I just have two quick slides on this that kind of talk about what we've done in the past with organizations. One of our first actual success story with the Get Solar program is an organization called Global Links. They're a nonprofit in the greater Pittsburgh area. Through a grant through the Green Mountain Energy Sun Club and a creative power purchase agreement, like a short-term power purchase agreement provided by Scala Solar, they were able to replace a section of the roof and get solar on it for a price that was quoted initially that was just the cost of the solar. So they were able to bundle these two things, and then it was all paid for by the grant anyway. So they were able to do something very creative by working with some more nuanced tools that the Solar Center was able to help them identify. And the cool thing about Global Links is they themselves operate extraordinarily sustainably. They're a zero energy building, I think now. They use reclaimed vegetable oil to run like their forklifts. And their mission, their output is that they provide redistribution of medical supplies that would be going into the waste stream because of overstock, or even just like old office furniture, something you don't think about. Redeploying this overseas and locally to communities in need, which is a really exciting mission statement. And now they can do that without paying for their electricity. The USDA is a really great resource for us. I know some of the communities involved might not be considered rural, but some of the communities we are working with are rural and have access to either the Rural Energy for America program, REAP, or the Community Facilities program, which is for nonprofits exclusively. And the USDA right now has a large amount of cash that they're trying to spend to help support renewable energy and energy efficiency adoption. If you are a rural business, does not matter what you are doing. It does not matter what your service that you provide is. If you are in an area that is identified as rural by the USDA, you're eligible for up to 50% of your project cost to be funded by the USDA to a maximum grant award of $1 million. So that covers pretty much most of the solar arrays that we would be seeing at that, $2 million buys a lot of solar, but down to even a $6,000 installation, or typically that would be something more like an energy efficiency implementation. But if you're an agricultural producer, even in an urban area, so you do an aquaponics farm inside of an urban center or a suburban center, that qualifies too, because your 51% of your gross income would be coming from agricultural production. This is an enormous opportunity. The USDA REAP grant a year ago was 25% with a maximum award of $250,000, and they were taking one application a year. They had one application period a year. They have now a quarterly application for the near future into 2024. And they've upped the percentage and they've upped the maximum award. And we just don't know how long that's going to last. So I really stress, if you are a rural business, this is an enormous opportunity to have most of your solar paid for. This stacks with that tax credit, by the way. So if you have a 50% tax credit and you can get a 50% REAP award, you pretty much are there. You're at zero cost, more or less. Loan programs are going to be a big part of financing solar for pretty much everybody. We're talking about tax benefits for a for-profit entity. That's pretty well laid out. It's been 20 years of the solar tax credit being a functional idea, and tax credits, tax deductions, these are not unusual things for businesses. The nonprofit piece of this, that direct pay, we're just not sure what the timeline is on delivery. So you're likely going to have to finance some or all of your solar upfront and wait for those rebates to come back in. So at least bridge loans will be a big piece of this. To that end, we worked with the Heinz Endowment and Bridgeway Capital in Western PA to establish a low interest, flexible term opportunity for organizations, that specifically nonprofits or municipal organizations in underserved communities, to try to help them defray that upfront cost. I know that's very regional and localized, but there are other resources like this out there, and there's other resources that are being developed. If you're in the Eastern PA, Philadelphia Energy Authority has some programs that could potentially support adoption of solar. And statewide, the Sustainable Energy Fund has a loan program that can service a similar need. That's designed specifically to facilitate renewable energy development and energy efficiency. So they know very well what the needs are of an organization going solar, and they tailor this grant or this loan opportunity to that. Occasionally, they have other loan programs that they can service when they get an award themselves, or when they have access to capital. So they're just a great organization that understands solar really well. They also manage the CPACE programs in most of the counties throughout the state that have CPACE. I don't have CPACE on the slide or in this presentation. It is a mechanism to finance infrastructure developments through your tax assessment rather than taking out a business loan or a loan on the entity. It is best used with large scale implementation, so multi-million-dollar projects. It can be used for solar at a smaller level. It's just probably not better served than like a sustainable energy, renewable energy loan, or a local bank when you're talking about solar under $1 million. But it is a tool in our tool belt, and then we could take advantage of if you're an entity that makes sense for, or if you're doing a large capital works program, like if you're replacing a roof, if you're doing a huge thermal upgrade, you might actually be a CPACE eligible organization. We can help folks explore that. And just generally, if you are looking to replace your roof in tandem with your solar, if that's the reason you've been thinking about solar, because you have a significant roof cost coming down the pike, that's something that actually makes sense to do in tandem. There's some potential tax benefits depending on your roof structure, and it creates some sort of narrative opportunities. If you're a nonprofit trying to finance a roof through grant funding or whatever, if you're adding solar to it, it can just make that a little bit more appealing to a funder, that you're packaging those two things. I showed the slide earlier. I just want to get back to the idea that the whole reason we're talking today is because we want to help you go solar. we are doing this for free for anybody that is listening to this because they're a part of the Get Solar Communities program. So if you are in Beaver County, if you're in Chester County, specifically Northern Chester, if you're in Center County, specifically in the Center region, or if you're in Harrisburg, Dauphin County, I really always want to say Dauphin County. If you're in any of those areas, we're going to provide all of the support to you at no cost because it's been foundation funding. We have a program designed to support you, and folks want to see you go solar. So please take advantage of this. But we'll start to finish help you out, and I'll show a little bit more about what these feasibility studies look like. This is a project, I don't have it named here. It's the Franklin Elementary School, part of the North Allegheny School District. These are actually slides that we use to present to solar developers as part of their process going solar. Their board in August voted to go forward with a power purchase agreement with the regional solar developer, BAI Group, mentioned earlier. It's not fully contracted yet. That's public information though. So they're at least at the point where they really want to do this. And as long as nothing trips them up in the contracting phase, this will be another success story of our program. But we identified that they had 2 rooftop surfaces that could be eligible for solar, one that had been recently replaced, which I think is probably visually obvious here, and one that could be replaced in the near future if bundling it made sense, but it had a little bit of life left on it. They also identified 2 ground mount areas that solar could go on as opportunities to have a visual solar installation for students and parents and folks visiting the school district. And it's worth noting, solar can be net metered up to 2 miles away from the bill that it would be servicing. So net metering is the program that really allows you to get the maximum value of your solar, because while solar, you can imagine, is very prolific and productive in summer months and during the middle of the day when it's hot and sunny outside, and maybe not as much during the middle of winter, you're still probably, a lot of organizations consume electricity evenly throughout the year. You don't necessarily have huge fluctuations. I mean, air conditioning, sure, in the summer, but some folks use electricity to do their heating and cooling in the winter, or thermal management, I should say. So how does that work when you're generating solar in real time and you're not using it, and in other parts of the year you're not benefiting maybe from that immediate automatic use of the solar? Well, net metering is a program that has your utility company basically become a virtual battery for you. So when you're producing too much electricity, it gets sent back to the grid. And when you're not consuming, when you're not producing as much solar and you're consuming it from the grid, that's fine too. But the utility company is going to make sure that those things even out at the end of the year for you. For them, it's May. So if you produce too much electricity in June and not enough in December, they'll even that out for you. Up to 100% is when you get your maximum value. You can overproduce. You don't get the full value for your solar past 100% of your energy consumption. Again, this is something that we would go into at length with you individually, talking about how solar would work for you. So don't worry that we're going through it pretty quickly here. So the next step with North Allegheny is, I believe it was actually John that did the modeling here, used helioscope, like I mentioned, to put a practical design together for those 4 sites that we identified for the school district. We would, of course, do this for you as well. And then we, taking their bills and some assumptions about their electricity. This actually isn't their cash flow analysis, because I wanted to didn't want to give too much information about it, but this is from another entity. Take a look at what they were paying their electricity versus what their savings could be, like their offset in the solar, modeling that over 25 years. That's a good standard for us to use, factoring in SREC benefits, which is a thing we can talk about a little bit later. Factoring in depreciation, which for nonprofit they can't claim. Our updated sheets include operations and maintenance costs, if you're paying those, includes the replacement of your inverters, which is a piece of technology that will need to be replaced over the life of the system. We look at all of that and then show you an estimated savings in year 1, savings over 25 years, those IRA tax benefits, all of those things we break down for you so that you can see it in a really clean and simple to understand way. And of course, we'll work you through it. Like, we'll talk you through and make sure you understand all these terms. If you see that, like what you see, and want to get real bids, competitive bids from regional solar developers, we'll manage that whole process for you. We'll organize the site visits, we'll manage the proposals, we'll make sure it's a fair, unbiased process that maximizes the value to you and really ensures that our friends in the solar developer world can see as many projects as possible and save them a little bit of time and energy by working with you directly to get your ducks in a row, your electricity bills, your structural drawings, all that stuff that we need. This is an older version of the chart that we use, but it's just kind of a good example of the side-by-side. Like, we get 4 solar developers that provide you proposals, and then we put their numbers together side by side so you can see, like, all right, theirs is larger, but the savings is smaller. Why is that? And we can kind of unpack those different ratios and calculations. But a lot of times, if you have a fairly straightforward solar opportunity, those bids will probably look pretty similar. But occasionally we see something really interesting, or a solar developer has a different angle on how to approach a problem. And those are really good things that come up in these reviews. So I've just said a lot, and I've gone through some of these topics pretty quickly. But I do want to emphasize that you don't have to digest all of this, and you're not making any commitments by going through these next steps. But I really would encourage anybody that is interested at all in looking at solar opportunities for their facilities to go to our website and fill out a pre-qualification survey. The next slide will show what that looks like. And just go ahead and submit an application. Again, there's no cost to enter the program. You're under no obligation to the PA Solar Center or to any of the participating developers to move forward with the solar array up until the point that you decide to actually sign a contract with one of them. And really, to get you the best information, if you start working on just gathering a recent electricity bill, and if you have any roof maintenance records or warranties, structural drawings are not necessary, nor are at this stage photos of like your switch gear, utility box, transformers, any of that stuff. But it's helpful if you have it, and it gives us some opportunities to see a little bit more accurate portrayal upfront of what your electricity needs are, or your solar benefits. October 13th would be a great deadline to submit an actual get solar pre-qualification, because it gives us some time to get that information back to you before the application deadline of the 20th. It's not impossible that we'd be accepting rolling applications after that, but we have a pretty strict timeline that we're trying to achieve, getting folks through the program and getting them the maximum opportunity for their tax benefits and their bids. So Friday, October 20th is it's a really important deadline to get your application in. No reason you can't submit it earlier, and no reason we couldn't get started on some of this work earlier, but that's like kind of, the end point for this process. This is what it looks like if you click through. Those 4 communities will say different things now. It'll say Center County, say Harrisburg, but this is just an example of like clicking through our website, finding where those materials are. You can download the application and some of the supporting information. It'll have links to this webinar and some other information. If you click through that today and it doesn't show all of this information, don't worry. We're doing a pretty significant update right now to make sure that everything's there. Just reach out to us if there's anything specifically you need. You can reach me at leo@pasolarcenter.org, or john@pasolarcenter.org, info@pasolarcenter.org, or you just click through our website and there's a bunch of forms that you can fill out. There's a lot of ways you can get a hold of us. This is what that pre-qualification survey looks like on the website. It has ticket and guest information for the webinar registration. If you filled it out on our website, that's what it looked like. But it'll just have this kind of information, your basic contact information, the address of the solar, super important. Otherwise, we don't know where it's going. This is just a quick view of what the application looks like. It's really general. We really don't have a strict, complicated application process. It's 3 pages. It's mostly just asking you questions about your organization and why you want to go solar. And then some of that core necessary information about where the solar would go. But yeah, if you do have trouble with it or you have questions about it, again, reach out. We'd love to talk to you. Yeah, and just these are the main 3 next steps. Try to keep it pretty simple. Pre-qualification, submit an application, reach out to us. In the meantime, if you have questions, I will take a break from talking and kick it over to John. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or anything I missed you think that'd be valuable to mention before we have some questions?
Yeah, you'd mentioned it before, but just wanted to reiterate, we've got 2 more webinars on this topic next week. So if you know of anybody that wasn't able to make it today, we can either share this recording or they can join a live session next week. And that's the 19th and the 20th, both at 12 p.m.
That's great. Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, and like I said, we'll probably have a workshop in October going over finance specifically. We just haven't penciled out the exact day yet, but we'll be doing that. And that's a good opportunity to just have maybe a little bit more of a multifaceted discussion about just the finance component of it. But if you do reach out to us directly, we will work with you individually on your specific financial needs or pathway. To that end, I will open up for questions. It's helpful. There's a little like hand wave button, or if nobody's talking, you just start talking and we'll do it that way. Keep it loose. Okay.
Yeah, hi, Leo. Could you talk a little bit about the creative financing when you combine roof repairs or redoing a roof with solar? What particular tax credits or tax deductions do those bring?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll actually tee it up to John because John has some personal experience working in the space, so I'll let him answer that one.
Great.
Sure. Thanks, Leo. So you want to make sure if you're going to be replacing the roof, it's going to have to be a white reflective roof. Usually it's a white TPO membrane that goes on top. And there's a portion of that roof cost that could be bundled into the investment tax credit or direct pay option. Because in the eyes of the IRS, if you have a highly reflective roof surface that's bouncing photons onto the backside of the solar panel, if it's a bifacial panel, can produce power on both sides.
Mhm.
So you're generating more energy because you put that roof system in. So there's a portion of that roof cost that you could potentially roll into some investment tax credits. So always a good idea if you know, if you're considering replacing the roof, talking to your roofing contractor about that, about the white TPO and what's available for your specific facility. So any flat roof surface, you'd be able to do that with. Pitched roofs wouldn't be able to necessarily qualify for that. It's only for flat roofs specific. But we'd be happy to dive into that topic a little bit more with you and look at the specifics of the project that you're considering.
Okay. What about we have one project that could almost be teed up. It would require some additional strengthening of the trusses.
Okay.
And not a lot, around I think $8,000, but you know, the municipality wants to save money any way they can. So could something like that be included? It's a pitched roof. I'm just wondering
if the cost to reinforce that structure could be rolled into the cost of the new PV system.
Yes.
There's an argument that could be made there. You know,
Okay.
you wouldn't be reinforcing it for any other reason aside from installing a solar PV system.
Okay.
So, but again, we're not tax experts, and we would certainly want you to have that conversation with your accountant or tax expert to really nail down, you know, what your risk appetite is and what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and I'll add, Kirk, that as part of this program, you know, we're doing the feasibility work, we're running the RFP for free. We always have some allocations for more comprehensive technical support to organizations. So we have not extraordinarily large bucket, but we do have a bucket to draw from if it's something like if we think helping defray some of that cost or doing some investigation on our end with some of the nonprofit partners we have that do engineering work, that could make sense. That might be a thing that we could explore. Obviously we can't do that with every single project, but we try to look at municipal projects, school districts, those kind of things that provide support in that way.
Right.
Great. I'm gonna pivot to Pam and field your question, Pam. Thanks for joining, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I just have a question, and I don't know that you've had this experience yet or have heard anybody else, but with municipalities and nonprofits, we have this ability to participate in the tax credit. But obviously you have to put all the money down up front, and then there's this direct pay. Do you have any understanding of how the process works? Or is it not that we have to have all that money up front and then get a payback later?
Yeah, so unfortunately, currently you do need to make the investment up front. There are some timing nuances that I'll get into here, but ultimately, like the most, like the broadest scenario is the tax exempt entity wants to do a solar array. They contract it, they have to pay for it, then they submit an application to the IRS that's reviewed by the IRS and DOE to confirm like the energy community piece of it. Then that's approved, and then on some timeline they send you back the percentage of money that you're owed. With the low income bonus, it's a little bit more complicated, of course, because there's a limited funding pool annually that right now it's 750 megawatts for the class one, the like just sort of general low income community projects in a low income community. Then there's the low income housing is a different class and there's a different allocation, but you can have a contract. You have to have a contract in place, but you can't start it before you submit the application. If you're in one of those communities, you need the verification of application and then you can pay for it. So that's just a little added nuance. But again, we would help anybody through that process. We just don't really know what the timeline is to get the money back yet. It's just never been done before. So what I would hope that to be surprised here, I'm going to say it's going to be slow because it's the IRS doing something for the first time, and they're the IRS not going to be a little carefree with it. They're going to be pretty litigious about it. So my guess is they're going to have a high volume and some inexperience to overcome. They have spent a lot of time, at least by our standards, formulating this and working out the application process stuff. So I think it's been well thought out and hopefully that helps expedite it. But I'm telling most folks to plan on not having that money back for a year from the point at which you spend it on your end. I would imagine, the market on solar lending is pretty evolved to understand this kind of work. Solar tax credits have been around, like I said, for 20-ish years. So they understand most people installing solar get this huge burst of money back within a year or so. So there's a lot of lending that is based around not having like interest on that portion of it, or like, bridge loans that are designed to kind of have a long amortization schedule, but a shorter payback. There's just a lot of stuff that's happening already in the market and will continue to evolve that will address this. But it is something we're trying to work with lending institutions like the SEF to figure out what a solution is scalable, because there's going to be a lot of solar going up and everyone has this problem, unfortunately. I wish I could give you something a little bit clearer than that.
No, that's better. I didn't when I asked the question, like when I was first talked about, there wasn't an application. So at least it's good that it's moving forward, that they're getting to figure out the process. And yes, the process the first time will be more complicated, but it sounds like you guys are involved in enough that it'd be good to work with you to know, the process. Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. And what we don't know, we think we know who to ask. Yeah, so I've been working with some tax accountants and lawyers that specialize in this kind of work, specifically solar, but tax credits and tax rebates, and that's where we get all of our information from. Reviewing it with them and poring over the legislation. The low income community bonus application is not out right now, but it will be out. They say Q3, so probably be 11:59 September 30th would be my target time. But all the applications that are received that qualify for that are treated as if they're day one within the first 30 days. So that period will open up and we'll have 30 days to get folks in, and then we'll kind of play it by ear. If anybody qualifies for those things that reaches out to us, we'll try to set them up on an appropriate timeline to maximize the opportunity there. But yeah, we're all going to learn a little bit over the next couple of months, for better or worse. Cool. Any other questions immediately? I really ripped through the slides. Probably should spend a little bit more time. Usually my problem is going way over time. So having 10, well, now 5 minutes feels like a bounty. I don't know what to do with it. Any other questions? Thoughts? Cool. Well, I'm sure other stuff is going to come up in the other webinars. We're going to be doing pretty much the similar or the exact same presentation the next two webinars, and then we'll put some things on the calendar that are a little bit more specialized. But I really encourage anybody listening to this to reach out to me, even if you're listening to this in October or later. We've done webinars earlier this year in the summer and the spring where I've just recently had folks reach out to me that watched it because they're online or made available through our partners. So I encourage you, even if this is a little out of date, to reach out to us and checking where the programming is going. So future listeners, thank you as well. Yeah, thank you so much for attending, everybody, and to the volunteers that are working in these communities. We'll send out PDF of the presentation and the recording to everybody that's attended. It'll be hosted on our YouTube. It'll be made available on our website. We of course we'll send that to you to host on whatever website or social medias outlets that you want to use as well, if that's of interest to you, or you could just link back to us. Totally fine to do either way. Great. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, a lovely weekend.